Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. And tonight we have one thing in our sights, and that is vote counting being underway in South Africa as millions of people turned out on Wednesday for landmark elections 3 decades after the end of apartheid, in a poll that could see the ruling ANC party fighting to protect its 3-decade-long hold on power. Now, South Africa's Independent Electoral Commission says that it thinks that turnout to Wednesday's landmark general election may well surpass the 66% seen in 2019. Millions of voters queued for hours to have their say in the most uncertain poll since the end of apartheid rule 30 years ago. President Cyril Ramaphosa of the ruling ANC party is hoping to be re-elected, but it is the most crowded political landscape the country's seen since 1994. And opposition parties are hoping that could mean a change to the status quo. Our Anne Wenzel followed the day for us from Cape Town.
Early today, the IEC said that at over 90% of the 23,000 voting stations, all had gone smoothly, but at 6% of stations, there were delays due to technical glitches. However, a source inside the IEC said the snaking queues were much more widespread than that, and also largely due to the IEC itself being disorganized, using the word mediocre to describe what they'd witnessed. But South Africans hungry for change stood in 4-hour-long queues, determined to have some change in their daily lives. And after 30 years of ANC rule, voters want more than they've gotten from the ruling party.
Yeah, I think there is some suspense in the election in certain provinces, I think more so than others. But it is exciting. It's nice to see a turnout.
And 30 years, I have seen nothing. The ANC has just destroyed.
And yes, there have been challenges over the last 30 years, but there's also been many successes.
There's been opportunities for all the other people in this country. I feel like my coloured people doesn't have that opportunity to move forward. So I want to see the change in the coloured communities.
This election offers a chance at change, which may be ushered in by a coalition government rather than the ANC.
So it's the country's 7th national elections since it became a multiracial democracy. Voters will choose the 400 members of the National Assembly, who will then choose a president. Now, South Africa may remain deeply divided on some levels, but one thing many voters can agree on is the issues that they're considering when weighing up who to back. An Afrobarometer survey puts immigration, currently at 32.9% in South Africa, right at the top of voters' concerns, way ahead of the day-to-day inconveniences of long-running power shortages and even concerns about corruption. Now, many of these issues have been around for a long time and have led to a potential shift in loyalties that could threaten the comfortable parliamentary majority that the ANC has long enjoyed.
He spent 27 years in prison, but in 1994, South Africa's most famous freedom fighter, Nelson Mandela, became the country's first black president. And the ANC, African National Congress, came to power.
We are going forward. The march towards freedom and justice is irreversible.
Founded in 1912 but outlawed in 1960, the ANC's pivotal role in ending the brutally racist apartheid regime earned the party profound allegiance from black South Africans as they embarked on a new democratic chapter. The ANC promised to reverse the injustices of white minority rule: more jobs, better housing, education, access to land. Since 1994, there's been some successes. More South Africans are going into education. 4 million subsidized homes have been created for low-income families. But after 30 years of ANC rule, South Africa still remains one of the world's most unequal nations. The ANC says it's still battling historic inequality.
Our struggle to overcome the devastating economic and social legacy of apartheid and colonialism, despite the severe challenges we now confront, we have the ability as the African National Congress to turn things around.
Already 10 years ago, the ANC's political rivals squarely blamed the party for the country's problems.
If our government was doing its work properly, the economy would be growing much faster to create the jobs we need to tackle our biggest problem, which is unemployment and poverty.
South Africa is the continent's top economy and has huge potential. It's rich in minerals, is a hub for African innovation and has a growing middle class. But the ANC's face persistent accusations of mismanagement and endemic corruption. Some of the most damaging scandals involve former President Jacob Zuma. He has been suspended from the ANC, faces criminal charges over an allegedly corrupt 1999 arms deal, and has even spent time in prison.
Zuma, you and your government don't represent me.
But the ANC's former Speaker of Parliament and even its Secretary General have also faced charges of graft. And voters have become increasingly frustrated. Discontent that is fanned by crippling blackouts and water shortages caused by ailing infrastructure. The slow but steady erosion of the ANC's reputation means that, for the first time since 1994, Nelson Mandela's party risks losing enough popular support to keep its parliamentary majority and may need to form a governing coalition.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by Asanda Ngwasheng, who's a political analyst, joining me now from Cape Town. Asanda, thanks so much for making time to come on the show on such a big day for South Africa. Now, you know, in the run-up to this vote, for months now, I would say, the top line into tackling this, internationally at least, has been this question of, is the ANC going to be able to hold on to its parliamentary majority? But you actually think that perhaps that risk is somewhat overblown. Why so?
Well, I think that, you know, the ANC is definitely going to drop in terms of the support that it got. So in the last election, it got about 57% in the last national election. And it's not likely to get that 57%, but I do think it'll still hit just over 50%, which secures the majority that it needs to govern the country. I also think because a lot of people are rightfully upset at the ANC because of corruption, because of crime, because of unemployment, but a lot of them actually choose to stay home as a protest vote against the ANC. And some even go as far as making the ballot and then spoiling their vote so that the ANC doesn't get their vote, but they feel like this makes a point. There are very few South Africans who take the anger and frustration at the ANC and actually go out and vote for opposition parties. And this is where the issue is, that although the African National Congress has disappointed a lot of people and a lot of people are upset with it, the opposition parties has simply failed to capture the imagination of most South Africans, and therefore they may not lose their majority. And in fact, it may actually be that a lot of the new political parties that are coming may be taking votes from the opposition rather than from the ANC itself.
So let's say that the polls suggesting that the ANC does slip below 50% are correct. What would that mean for the ANC? What would having to form a coalition mean for South Africa? Would that necessarily be a bad thing?
Well, in general terms, a coalition is not necessarily a bad thing, but in this particular economy that is post-COVID, that requires a strong government who can make decisions and be decisive in their actions, it's not necessarily a good thing. Because we've seen in South Africa at a municipal level, multiple governments that were coalition governments, a lot of them formed by the opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, which have folded within a year because of infighting and because ideologically, a lot of these parties don't actually have a foundational basis upon which to agree. And so what then happens is when issues that require ideological alignment come up, they can't come to an agreement. And that is what we've seen in South Africa, multiple coalition governments at municipal level or local government level coming together and then folding within a year, which has led to a series of lack of delivery across various provinces and municipalities in South Africa, because one government comes in, has certain priorities, and just before they start spending the money towards those priorities, a new government then comes in and changes the priorities to its own priorities. And just as they're about to start start implementing, a third government or coalition then comes in, which causes a lot of instability in an already kind of precarious country in terms of volatility because of youth unemployment and all of the other issues that I've mentioned.
So we focus so much on the ANC and what its fate is likely to be coming out of these elections. But what about any of the opposition parties, particularly the main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance? It's also possibly facing a slide in support as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. There seems to be, South Africans seem to be tired of the incumbents, and that is the African National Congress at a national level and the Democratic Alliance at a provincial level because they govern the Western Cape. And what a lot of people have been saying is that they feel the incumbents are arrogant. They feel like they don't listen to the people anymore because they feel like they kind of are guaranteed their vote. And so a lot of people have gone out to say they want to vote for other political parties that haven't had a chance and see if they can deliver a government that's different to what the incumbents have delivered. But the Democratic Alliance in particular has and will see a decline because they chose to be pro-Israel, which is against the South African government stance, which is to be pro-Palestine. And this is something that I think is going to cost them a lot of votes, particularly colored votes and Indian votes and Muslim votes, which are the votes that the DA relied on in past elections to be able to win, because the Democratic Alliance has mainly been a political party of white interests and white people with a smattering of colored people, Indian and Muslim people voting for them, who now have made public declarations that they will never get their vote again because they do not support genocidal political parties.
Thank you so much for that breakdown. Asanda Ngosheng there, political analyst, speaking to us from Cape Town as the country goes to vote for its general election. Now, on the national ballot paper are 52 parties, including the Democratic Alliance that Asanda just referred to there. But there's also the Radical Economic Freedom Fighters, the brand new MK Party, Independents. However, it is still the ANC's record that seems to play the biggest part in shaping what's to come. And part of the reason its survival hangs in the balance is a growing sense of abandonment from key demographics. Now, our team went to a rural village and spoke to voters there from a small village in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and they shared their hopes for the future.
Nkolokolo is a small, isolated village in the Zulu province. Mbongeni was born here. He dreams of decent roads, but above all, a bridge. Residents have to cross the river, which often floods, to do their shopping or go to school. 5 people have died here in the past 10 years.
Over 15 years, we're talking one thing. I say we need the bridge to cross the river. They said, okay. Before, we were putting the stone here. Say, after finish to put the stone, we can come to put the cement to make the bridge. We do that, still we never come.
To cross the river is also dangerous for the elderly. This mother and grandmother no longer have access to medical care. The residents meet regularly to organize among themselves, but they are alone. Their ANC councillor resigned a few months before the elections. No one has repaired the roof of the creche, and there is no running water in the village.
All the 3 months we don't have water. The water tankers didn't come and deliver the water, and we don't have the right road. I think you see the road on that side. The Vatican can't come here. We're trying so many times, but nothing happened.
One has to travel far to the sugarcane fields to find work. Mbongeni is keen to introduce us to a family whose only means of survival is social grants. The mother and daughter have 3 children to feed. Like half of all South Africans, they live below the poverty line.
We're very, very, very cross, the people. Very, very, very cross.
I have never voted, but this year it's different.
The people of Nkolokolo have been voting. They seem determined not to support the ruling party. But to have cast their vote, villagers, including the elderly, first had to cross the river to reach the polling station.
Well, just under a fifth of the more than 27 million registered voters in South Africa are younger than 30. Kim Chulu Amina is a lecturer and a chief technical officer at a startup in South Africa focused on allowing young people to learn in their mother tongues. Kim, thanks so much for making time to speak to me. First of all, there's a lot of generational divide, apparently, in the support of the ANC. Young people seem to be particularly aggrieved with the current kind of state of affairs. From the work that you do lecturing and working in the field of education, could you give us a bit of an insight as to why that might be?
Thank you very much, first of all, Georgia, for having me here. Well, within the work that I do, which, as you mentioned, includes, being a lecturer, being involved in education, and, we focus quite a lot on education technology and trying to ensure that we can provide better education, starting from the foundation phase. There are a lot of issues that is contributed and that is still contributing into the divide as it is currently. And some of those issues have been, based on trying to fix the previous divide. But however, it is now causing another divide. And I think when we start speaking about it from your entry level to university, you kind of find yourself in a position where what was set as a rule or as a way to have more Black people to graduate from a certain percentage with mathematics is now turning out to kind of be against them, because the percentage that they pass with is now the reason why they can't have access to certain high qualifications, which are currently paying well in this kind of situation. So those are some of the things that, we're looking at. How do we fix it and how do we contribute in fixing them? Because it is causing definitely grievance amongst young people.
So more coherent policies in terms of education that not only mean that you get more kind of traditionally disenfranchised South Africans into tech and STEM spaces, but also in a way that means that they continue to progress. Is that the kind of landscape that you're outlining there?
Yeah, because we having a huge skills gap in the country. Like it is quite bad, and that comes from the early stages of not being well prepared. But when we progress with that unprepared structure, we definitely see it as they now move into different areas. And, that's definitely one of the foundation of why we wanted to do the work as we do it. But there's definitely a need for restructuring the way the current system and process is done to benefit the young people in terms of more employment opportunities as well.
When it comes to employment, do you think that the government has been ambitious enough in terms of embracing new opportunities, in terms of creating jobs that come with emerging sectors like tech?
I would say that they have not aggressively done it as we would have expected. And again, this comes also from some issues where we've got, we had different layers of issues that we had to solve before we get to where we are. And unfortunately, COVID also happened, and the majority of the fund went into certain areas, and some of them were indicated also to be missing or used for other things. But there has not been the expectation that we would have had, especially after COVID, where we saw that a lot of emerging tech businesses or entrepreneurs or startups were actually growing and booming in other part of the world. That has not been that increase to say, now that we see what is happening, we can then provide more to this industry, because it's definitely what we're forced to witness. And there is still a lot to be done. And I might say there's still a lot to be done for this to be fixed. We're a country where we've got 90% or so the population or households that actually have a mobile device in the household, and yet again the way it's being utilized to benefit certain digital careers or path or opportunities is not yet at the level that we should have actually been expecting by now.
Mm-hmm. And you were saying that you actually directly asked some of the young people that you lecture, what their plans were going into the election, and you were quite surprised at how little engagement there was. Just tell us a little bit more about what you encountered when you put that question to them.
Well, there's definitely a disengaged youth, I would say, and that would probably come from different angles, and we know that some of them have not yet experienced what exactly the world of work is. And I'm at an institution where the students there are actually provided with, well, the majority of the students there are usually provided with a fund and support from the government, and that fund allows them to have education and also allows them to have meals for and residence and things like that, which they have to apply for, and you have to fit within a particular category for you to then be qualifying for that. And when considering all of that, it was quite surprising that in the previous election, before the one of today, when I engaged with the young people, the conversation were very much not promising. There was a lot of disengagement and trying to check from them, like, why are they not voting? And you can see that there is a lot of not even a reason to not going because it is not impacting them.
So they just don't think it's going to change anything for them.
It doesn't seem to change anything. Hence, not enough to be done. I mean, you mentioned yourself the numbers there. I mean, we have a huge youth population, but the fact that they are not taking action into what exactly should determine their future is very much it should be alarming, and it's something that I don't think it's been tapped very well from the political party for them to understand, to make that an understanding to the young people, the youth, that their voice matter in this situation, and that's alarming. Yeah.
So we don't have very much time, but what I think is interesting is the quite unique take that you've taken in terms of trying to make sure that learning and young learners see themselves reflected in some of the tools that you've put together. So it's Ambani. It is I think it's a digital platform whereby young children can, from the beginning of their life, start learning and establishing critical thinking skills and processing information in their mother tongue rather than being thrown into English schools. This kind of creativity, do you think have you seen any interest from state institutions to start kind of folding this in better into educational policies or institutions?
Listen, just, very, very quick, probably. We've got quite a good number of institutions, higher education institutions in South Africa. But I can literally point you with, just one hand, just one or two institutions that have actually actively pushing for a multilingualism approach in terms of how they would be teaching. And that's one of the, institutions that we're actually having a project with. And we are helping them with our technology in terms of furthering and simplifying how they can actually provide that versus the traditional way of printing many for different languages. And it's something that should have been implemented across, but even the state, I would say state-owned institutions, or, the institutions that definitely affiliated to the state, are not the ones that are enforcing those policies. So it's something that definitely has to be looked at. A lot of the young people, a lot of the kids, they have like 8% of the kids are literally only speaking English in the households in South Africa when they're young. But then as soon as they get into school, they have to now start changing and drafting their way of thinking and their way of processing things in English, which causes certain barriers. And we definitely thought we could contribute at that early stage to remove those barriers and not create unnecessary gaps when we already have so much from the past. So let's allow for cognitive development to just go smoothly and allow kids to grow and understand concept better.
So, I mean, the point there is really taking a creative approach, taking advantage of all the tools available to make sure that every aspect of society is being folded in. Kim, thank you so much for taking the time, for sharing your perspective with us. Thank you all very much for joining us for Eye on Africa for this South African election special. That's all we have time for, unfortunately. But do join us again if you can. Till then, take care.
Special event with weekly programs and special guests.
C'est la fête, le sport, et il faut que ça reste comme ça.
The opening of the Olympic Games is getting closer.
C'est bientôt, soyez prêts.
Destination Paris with France 24.